Welcome to This Is 8CD, the podcast dedicating to exploring the world of human-centered design and making our world a more inclusive and accessible and impactful place. I'm Jerry Scullion, and in each episode we bring conversations with thought leaders and change makers who are shaping the future of design, business and social innovation. In today's episode, I'm joined by the incredible and the brilliant Jamie Shields, co-founder of Disabled by Society, a 100% disabled owned and led business committed to shifting how we think, learn and act on disability inclusion. Now, Jamie is an accessibility consultant and speaker, an advocate who challenges ableism and helps organisations create meaningful change. In this episode, we cover three things. Number one, unlearning ableism, how systemic barriers affect disabled people daily, and why organisations must move beyond compliance to real inclusion. And number two, designing for accessibility from the start. Now, why retrofitting accessibility is costly and ineffective, and how embedding it right from the beginning benefits everyone. And number three, holding organisations accountable, how to assess whether a company is genuinely inclusive and not just ticking a box. Jamie shares their lived experience navigating an inaccessible world, the impact of internalised ableism, and how businesses can take a practical step to becoming more inclusive. Now, if you enjoy this episode, please like, share and subscribe. It helps us reach more people and spark more critical conversations. And if you're looking to take the first step in bringing a human-centered service design approach to your organisation, you guessed it, sign up for my free 5-day email course with the link is in the description. Let's get straight into it. Jamie, come here. I'm delighted to have you on the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from and what you do.
Yes, so I am from Northern Ireland, hence the lovely, strong Northern Irish accent. Specifically, Cool Island, as we've discussed, as you know it, which when you tell people you're from Cool Island, they have no clue what you're talking about, so it's better to say Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
I am a disabled speaker, trader, consultant, and co-founder of Disabled by Society, 100% disabled owned and disabled led business, which essentially is changing the way we think, learn, and view about disability.
Right, excellent.
My fault.
No, absolutely. You've said that before, and I'm delighted to have you, because I followed you on LinkedIn, and I was like, God, it would be great to speak to Jamie. And I'd love to learn a little bit more around the origins of first of all, how you came to set up Disabled by Society. So maybe we'll start off with that. You know, what was the precursor to it and what were you doing before?
Yeah, well, to be honest, if you look at my CV, I have the most colourful CV. Like, it looks like I had no motivation to be in employment. I was in places for like 3 months, maybe less. And there was big, long gaps in my CV. So people used to judge me by my CV, and I can understand why, but it wasn't because I didn't want to work or I wasn't motivated. I am registered blind, I'm autistic, I'm ADHD, I collect disabilities like Pokemon cards. And like, I struggled with employment my whole life. So I bounced job to job, trying to get those adjustments that I needed to kind of just do what everybody else could do in the workplace. But most people didn't really understand. So I bounced around for ages, landed in recruitment, which is strange because I couldn't find a job or keep a job. And then suddenly I was helping people find jobs. And in that job, I was there for about 5 years, but it was the first time I had ever been promoted. It was the first time I'd ever been listened to as a disabled person. I got my adjustments. Now, don't get me wrong, the company didn't get it right every time, but when they got it wrong, they listened, whereas I'd never experienced that. So whilst in that employment, I became their global disability lead of their disability network.
Right.
Then I actually became their accessibility lead because I was constantly giving off about inaccessible barriers I was encountering. And then because of that there, I kind of was like, do you know what? I love this. I'm starting to speak about my disability. I got this confidence I'd never really had before talking about it. Because I had a lot of shame, I had a lot of regret. Like, I grew up in the 90s. You didn't grow up in Northern Ireland in the 90s. Like, I'm gay as well, like disabled and gay. Like, people just don't know how to take that. So like, that confidence had never been something I'd had before.
Sure.
So I started doing speaking inside of my job, which was obviously a lot of juggling. And my employer, they were really supportive initially, but then it kind of got to the point where I was doing training and they were like, do you know what? We don't know if you can do both this. And I was just like, no worries, I'm going to make a go at this. And went self-employed for 6 months and founded Disabled by Society last year with Celia Chateau as my co-founder.
Wow, like it's been a busy couple of years for you as well, like, so how long has the business been going?
So officially it launched as Disabled by Society in October last year.
Yeah.
However, unofficially, we were operating as Unlearning Ableism. There's two friends who were disabled working together, which was a nightmare for clients when the invoicing you because they were sending you an invoice for two people
Yeah.
every time. So we were like, you know what, we love doing this here. We have so many little, can't talk about some of them, but we have so many projects going on in the background. I think I told you about at the start of this. And because that was like, we're so connected, why do we not just put this in their business? So
Formalize
we
it.
went live in October, but officially everyone's known us as a brand since last January.
Okay, very good. So one of the bits that I want to talk to you about is, compliance. Okay. And when you look
Mm-hmm.
at I'm a service designer, so I help organizations design their services, mainly in the government space. And this has absolutely no connection to any of the work that I've done before. This is, intel that I've worked with from around the world. So this is not reflective of my current clients or of the sort. But when accessibility and compliance start spoken about in the same sentence, I'm keen to really understand how we can actually move beyond that so it becomes closer to their DNA of actually how they operate. When you speak to people like myself who have, I guess, opportunities to bring those perspectives into projects, what advice do you give them to help nudge closer towards the desired way of working as opposed to like just being a tick box exercise?
100%. I think everybody has this thought that accessibility is an afterthought or it's a trend we should jump in because XYZ company's doing it and we should be doing it. When really, I think that's such a kind of outdated mentality. Like, no, we should be doing it right from the start. Like, accessibility when you come in at a later date to do is expensive and
Yeah,
it means going back and redoing work. So, my first piece of advice is it should always be ingrained in your process right from that initial design stage. Whatever it is you're doing, you need to have those policies and it built into your processes, but also remove the fear because I think
right.
people are afraid of what they don't know. And accessibility, most people aren't educated about it. Like if you've went and done marketing, for example, you've not been taught about accessibility. Most people who learn coding don't learn about accessibility unless they go and seek that out themselves. So
Yeah,
it's a bit like we don't have this knowledge. What do we do? And I would say there is work with disabled consultants. You know, there's disabled consultants out there who will come in and help you write that accessibility into your processes. They'll train your team to be more aware of what accessibility is because it's not just up to one person or one team. Everybody kind of needs to have an inkling of what their role is in this here. So I think with that there is working with people to help you write that accessibility process. And then also look at the kind of legal implications. I think in the UK, where I'm based, there's there's obviously the duty of adjustments and accommodations from an employer, but there's nothing really concrete about accessibility that says your website needs to be accessible unless you're a public organization. But if you're a private organization, there's no kind of restrictions there. Or if you look in the US, they have the ADA, they have so many others, I can't remember the names right now, ADHD's going. But in the US, they have more laws around making sure websites are accessible. And if they're not accessible, they can potentially be taken to court. And then in Europe, we're seeing the European Accessibility Act comes in force into June, which means your products and services need to be accessible for disabled people if you operate in Europe. So I think in the UK, where I'm based, as I said, like we're not nowhere near as good as other countries. And I think we need that uniform aligned approach because if you're a global business, like most companies are now just not operating in one market, we're operating in global markets.
yeah,
If you're operating in global markets, you need to be doing this in these countries to avoid fines, to avoid being taken to court by somebody who can't access your
yeah,
services. So I think making sure that everybody has that knowledge, embed it, but also see it as a way to protect yourself,
sure.
also to attract more people, but also to think about the future of your workplace because we're an aging population. Your workforce is an aging population. You might not experience disability today yourself, but statistics show that you're going to experience that. And if not you directly, somebody you're in contact with, your family member, your friend, your colleague. So it's
Yeah,
about
no,
future proofing too. Couldn't say the word.
no, absolutely. You mentioned there the websites, and I think
Mm,
accessibility tends to, enter those conversations when people are more familiar about the kind of the area or the channel that they have control over. services encapsulate the entire ecosystem, so the omni-channel experience. Can you give me examples of ways that the kind of ableism has manifested itself in society from your own perspective?
100%. So I'm not sure. Ableism is the discrimination of disabled
Yeah,
people, which we all contribute to. It's essentially systemic oppression, but most people aren't aware of it. Like if I say homophobia, we know what that is. If
yeah,
I say racism, we know what that is. It's not that it doesn't exist, but we're more aware. So we're not really taught about ableism because we're not taught about disability. So when it comes to ableism, it's ingrained in accessibility because if you think about designing something, ableism is discrimination or the less favourable treatment of disabled people. If you're designing something for people who are non-disabled and not even considering disabled people, which is like 1.7 billion people on the planet
wow,
and a market worth $13 trillion globally. So why wouldn't you think of that market? But when you think about the number of disabled people and when you're designing, if you're not designing to include them, you're giving them less favorable treatment. So you are effectively discriminating against
yeah,
them. So ableism is embedded in that our side where we're not thinking of disabled people because we don't think of them as customers. We think of disabled people and we think of these charity cases who, oh, they're sitting at home, oh, God love that wee disabled person. Or if a disabled person does something extraordinary, like goes to the shop or gets a job, we get called inspirational. And it's like, I'm not inspirational for needing to pay my bill each month.
yeah,
So I think we have these assumptions and these narratives around disabled people. So we don't see them as those customers, those end users, those service users. And then as well as that there, I think we have this fear around disability. And I mentioned it a wee bit earlier. We're afraid of disability because we don't know nothing about it. Like when
yeah,
we're in education in the 90s, when I was going through school, I only learned segregation. I was segregated from my classmates and excluded. My non-disabled classmates seen that and obviously picked up on that. And that's why we as adults, we don't have classes or we don't get taught about disability. And if we do, it's from a very legal standpoint. If you don't hire them, you'll get taken to court. If you don't give them an adjustment, you'll get taken to court. Disabled people don't want to be running around taking people to court. That's expensive
yeah,
and it takes a lot of time. Trust me, I've done it. Probably didn't have my case there. But with regards to the whole kind of making your processes and the ableism in those processes and workplace,
sure,
we need to be understanding that disabled people are we're contributing members of society.
yeah,
You don't need to fear us. And yes, it's hard when you don't have all the knowledge, but sometimes it's okay to stop and say, I don't know. What can I do to support you? Or if we're designing a service or a product, speak to disabled end users, ask them what they need from it, test it with them as well, and be open to feedback, but also recognize with accessibility sounds like an amazing end destination and
yeah,
we're all going to be fully accessible one day, but it's not a realistic destination because what's accessible for one person won't be to another. And whilst we have principles like universal design, which is designing things for everybody, that doesn't actually mean it's going to be fully accessible to somebody who maybe
yeah.
has a specific disability that intersects with another, and maybe a screen reader that would work for somebody else isn't working for them. So it's been open to like, people navigating things and using things in different ways
Yeah, no,
within the
absolutely.
mouthful.
I'm gonna tell you a little secret here in the next story. Imagine if this is a magic wand, okay, right? I had a magic wand and I was able to give you some sort of power that you're able to have influence over the whole world for 1 year. Okay, like what would be that radical um, sort of thing that you would do to make sure that the implementation of kind of disability is considered within the design process? What are those things that the listeners can do to take away an action from your magic wand? This is my makeshift magic wand. It's a Sharpie. Boom, gone.
Well, do you not know disabled people already have superpowers? Everyone tells us we have superpowers anyway, which is horrible because it's a complete ableist narrative. I
I
didn't
know.
choose my superpower to be registered blind, to be invisible. But I think if I could give listeners something to take away and kind of start
Yeah.
implementing in the design processes, think about things. We don't engage things. We engage things in a very binary way, and we think that's the way to do it.
Mm,
But when you're really working with accessibility, it's not about designing one set thing. It's about designing things that have alternative ways of engaging.
right.
So think of an image. When you upload an image, that is one way of engaging with it. It's visual. You see it.
Yeah.
But with everything, not everybody can see that. So why don't we add alt text? which is a short description of the image that gets embedded into the image, which means if somebody comes along with a screen reader, they can hear what that image is and create that picture. But not everybody can use that screen reader, so you've created two different ways of engaging people with screen readers visually, but somebody might not have that sight, but they might not be able to use a screen reader. So use an image description. An image description is visible, unlike your alt text, which is embedded into the image. Your image description goes below the image or is a caption beside it, and it's just for anybody who cannot use that screen reader. Now, there's three ways that you've provided to engage with that image. Now, if it's an in-person, say you were at an event and it was an image in an event, you can make that image tactile. So if somebody who's blind or somebody who has issues with sight can come along and actually feel the image. So it's tactile, it's raised up so they can feel it. So there's four alternative ways of engaging that image. Obviously, trading's online, one's actually in person. So it's really thinking about those alternative ways to engage with things. Videos is such a big part of society. Like everything you do at work, like there's a training video. Oh, we're launching a product. Here's a training video. We're constantly using videos because they help sell. But we need to make videos accessible. And I know companies are getting better at using captions. Captions go in your video. They are text-based representation of all spoken words. But what we're seeing is people using captions but not making them accessible. So they're trying to bring them into brand. Oh, we'll make them in brand and make them pretty, and we'll make them appear here, 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 which is like a game of Where's Wally with captions. Captions need to be accessible. The point of them is to help people engage with the video and catch up on that spoken word. So add them at the bottom, use like black and white, or if you're using your branding colors, check the color contrast of those colors. There's tools online that you can do that with. And then again, think of that video in alternative ways. One is the visual way of engaging. Two is your captions that are accessible now.
Yeah.
And three, add a video description, describe what's going on in that video.
Sure.
And if you really want a fourth, add a transcript. There's four different ways you can engage with that video. Because again, it's whatever you're designing, whether it's something digital, whether it's something physical, think of the different ways that people engage and then test it out. Like if you're an organization, you're bound to have disabled colleagues there. Set up a disabled employee network so people can kind of come along and help support with these here and test it out for you. But obviously reward them, incentivize them for doing it. Nobody should be doing free extra work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I studied industrial design and I qualified in 2022 and a very long time ago. And I feel like I've been having this conversation for over 20 years and it's still kind of radical for some people. They're like, how do you unlearn, or how do you, what am I trying to say here? Like, how do you unlearn ableism? Like, because it seems like that is almost the default for the majority from what I'm hearing. Is that a fair assumption?
Oh, 100%. Like,
Right.
and that's literally everything we do at Disabled by Society. Because that was our brand before we actually launched Disabled by Society. It was the Unlearning Ableism, or Unlearning Ableism, and then we did the Unlearning Ableism podcast. But with that, like, we have it so inherently ingrained in us. Like, ableism is systemic. It means it's ingrained in everything, your language, your the way you think. It's not even that you're trying to wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to pay off as many disabled people as I can. You know, nobody wakes up with that intention. And if you do, you're in a very small minority, I imagine.
Yeah.
But nobody gets that intention. And I think nobody wants to get it wrong. And I think because we don't have the understanding of this disability, it stops us trying sometimes. And that is the biggest failure of all, because we should be trying. We should be open to get it wrong, because if you get it wrong, somebody's going to come along and help you learn it. Somebody will say to you, that's not right. And then you take that on board, you take that accountability, and then you go ahead and do the work to make it right. But it's that fear that stops us. So I think that's the first thing we need to remove, is that fear. And then that unlearning ableism, it's not like it's not like an end goal. It's something that you're constantly doing.
Yeah.
Because there's no one way to be disabled. There's no one disabled expert. And if somebody claims themselves to be an expert of all disability, I challenge them at every time, because I've been disabled for 34 years of my life. I'm an expert of my disability and my lived experience. My uncle and my nephews who see my sight conditions as me, I don't know why they experience disability.
Right.
Like, we have overlapping shared experiences, but you know, I'm also gay, my uncle's straight, like there's different
perspectives,
layers of our identity. So I think when it comes to unlearning ableism, it's recognizing that you're never going to know everything. It's constantly opening yourself up to learning. It's learning from different sources, following black, white, every diversity of disabled person out there. And it's also really just being open to learning and taking that
Yeah.
accountability.
Are you okay to talk about your own lived experience?
Yeah,
So you mentioned there that you're certified blind, correct?
yeah, registered blind. Yeah,
Register blind, not certified. You passed the exam to
I'll
be
take
blind.
that though. It wasn't like an exam.
So what does that look like for you when you're kind of navigating the world? What would it look like if you wanted to go and access a service that you do regularly enough, like maybe going to the city? Talk to me about one of the steps that you take that might be, kind of a little bit more different to say how I do it.
100%. Well, like, the way my eyesight works is the best way to kind of describe to people what I say is what somebody sees in 20 meters, I need to be 5 meters or 4 to 5 meters close to see exactly what you see in detail. So I can
Right.
see, but it's almost like I can see in front of me, and then there's like a big wall of fogginess. And the more I move around, it's kind of like you've been stuck in fog and someone's put a glass over you and you're just moving around in this fog.
Okay.
So that's the best way to describe it. If I'm walking along and somebody walks past me, like on the side of the road, I'm not going to see who that is. Like somebody could be waving at me, or I could turn around and see a car pull up, and I think, is they waving at me? Are they honking at me? Because I physically can't see. I mistake people for objects and objects for animals and people for animals actually too. And there was times I'd walk down the street and I'd be like, "Oh my god, look at that big dog! Pick up our wee small dog," to my partner. And it's actually a person tying the shoelace and they walk past really upset, or you can tell they're physically angry when they push past you. But like for me, leaving the house, I don't really leave the house. I know it sounds really sad. Like I do
Mm.
travel and stuff for work, but like I don't really take myself into town. And I think when I was younger, I was definitely a lot more confident with my disabilities. But obviously, as we age, my eyesight's not what it was. Like I can feel my
Mm.
eyesight getting worse as I kind of age. And I'm 34 now. I know I look 21, but when my eyesight deteriorating, I can feel that there. So I don't like to go out in public unless I have somebody with me. So usually
Yeah.
I'll take my partner with me who, like if we're in the shop, he'll have to say, "Oh, this is the price of that there." Because otherwise I get to tell an M&S and I bought 5 things and it's like over £100 and it's like, oh wait, if I would have known this was actually £30 for a box of sweets, I would have lifted them.
Yeah.
So it's not being able to see the price, but it's then it's also having to have the confidence to ask for help.
For sure.
I've asked for help in the past and I've been told, "Well, you don't look disabled," or, "Well, why would I help you? You don't have a guide dog, you don't have a cane." Like, I don't need those tools. I have enough sight in front of me to see. Like, I know to follow the footpath to cross the crossings, but I shouldn't have to have a guide
Yeah.
dog or a sign above me flashing I'm disabled to get help. So, in the past, because of those rejections, it stopped me wanting to have to self identify.
Right.
And, like, I'll be honest, I am standing here talking about my disability now, but I didn't talk about my disability for 20 something years. Like, I was silent about it. I had so much internalized ableism and a lot of mental health challenges because of being disabled.
Yeah.
So, like, that was my internalized ableism where you absorb the ableism and the exclusion experience. So, like, I had a very colourful history of my disability, and like, the whole self acceptance and empowerment I found only came from having an employer who supported me, and
Right.
really only came from having a partner who kind of was like, "You need to stop blaming yourself for everything that goes wrong with your eyesight. It's not you're not the problem."
Yeah.
Because like trigger warning, like I was binge drinking, I was substance abusing, I was self harming, and I attempted suicide many times. It was a very dark period of my life, but
Mm.
it was because I didn't have what people had. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a roof over my head. I didn't have the means to survive, and I was
Yeah.
bouncing around like a yo-yo, trying to find it all singing, all dancing, inclusive bar. So now, like I'm a lot more articulate, but like because my disabilities are not getting better, we'll say, it just kind of does knock a wee bit of confidence out of you. But I'm still confident, but I can talk about my disability a lot more now. But I think my mobility is not what it used to be.
Yeah. Jamie, like I'm so sorry to hear that. Like everyone has a story, like, and what you see is what not always what you get, like, that's
That's
it's hard to think that the society is, kind of not done you any favors to allow you to get these get the best out of life, like, I want to go back to the bit there you were talking about. You go out shopping with your partner and stuff, who, by the way, you recently got engaged. I want to say big congratulations to you on that. um you mentioned there about the prices and not seeing the prices and stuff. I'm keen to know, there's probably technology people out there listening to the podcast who are like, oh, you can do these certain things. How has technology worked to improve your life over the last, maybe say, decade, as you've kind of hopefully you mentioned there about the struggles and stuff. Like, how have you managed to rebuild your life, and has technology played a role in that? Like, what does that look like?
Oh yeah, like technology is brilliant. Like it's
Yeah,
both a blessing and sometimes a hindrance for accessibility.
for
But like if
sure.
I'm out in public now, like the shop beside me, like I'm happy to walk up to the shops that they like not even 5 minutes away from my house. I was gonna say 10 minutes, but that's a lie. It's probably 3 minutes. Because how slow I walk, it's probably just feels longer. But like that shop, I can go into it. I'll take my phone out. My phone's constantly in my hand. I will use it to zoom in and things and take photos. Like I do that in most stores,
Okay,
but
yeah,
people have called me out for it. Like, you take a photo of me, and I'm like, no, because like when I use my phone, it's like touching my nose. Like I've learned to use my nose as a stylus. That's how close I get to my phone.
right.
And I don't really like to use my screen reader when I'm out and loud, so I just zoom in and take photos. But as well as that, there is apps out there for people who, like myself, are visually impaired or registered blind.
Yeah,
And like that app is like Be My Eyes, where you can actually ring up and it'll be on camera with somebody and they'll talk you through what's in front of you. Like, you don't even have to be in a shop. You could be at home trying to pick an outfit to wear for an interview. Like those kind of apps are great. There's also glasses and stuff that people can get now that you wear and it'll come up like, do you know that movie Minority Report from years
yeah.
ago, Tom Cruise? It's kind of like that, where things come up with little boxes coming off them and it'll talk you through what you're seeing. So technology is really helping that aspect, but I think those kind of things like those glasses, they're great, but they're really expensive.
I was going to
There's a
say they
lot of
probably
money
cost
goes
a
into them.
fortune.
Oh, absolutely fortunate. The ones I was looking at when they first came out last year were like 3K. And if you think
Wow.
about, disabled people, we have an additional cost of living as a
I was
disabled
going to
person.
say, yeah,
I don't drive, so I have to taxi left or well, I was gonna say left to right, but I'm going more than left to right. I have to taxi a lot, so I do. And even like public transport, like if I get on the bus, chances are I'm gonna get the bus to the wrong town or get a train to the wrong place. Like I'm not getting public transport, even when I do get help. But I'm using a lot more money in travel. If I'm printing something off, I have to print it in actual large font, so it comes off a bigger font.
of course.
Because of my ADHD, I also have this impulse to constantly spend. And I know most people spend, but my ADHD, I'll be sitting in the back door and be like, oh, I need bin bags. And I'll go on to buy bin bags on Amazon. And before I know it, I spent £300 on Pokemon and Rhino things. And I'm an
Yeah,
adult. Like, what am I doing? So, like, you have that impulse. So, and then you have people who maybe have conditions with having to pay for bandages or medical equipment, or you have people who have wheelchairs. You don't always get the funding for that. So you have to pay constantly towards your own
for sure.
mobility, which I understand, but there's an additional cost to be disabled, and it's estimated by the UK Charity Scope to be like 1,000 or just over £1,000 per month additional for each household with a disabled person. So it's like
Wow.
there's that additional cost, but all these tools and things that are meant to help us are
Yeah.
expensive, or it's a bit of a nightmare.
I know, like, that's what's blowing my mind. Like, I didn't even think about like the increased cost for printing and just something like that. Like, a lot of the people that I've coached over the last couple of years, designers, they're struggling to find organizations that really align to the principles of human-centered design. And I'd love to get your take on this, because I wonder, do you know if there's a question out there that you can ask organizations when you're interviewing or whatever it is, to really help them determine where they're at in their ableistic journey, if that's
Mm.
if that's a phrase you can say, to ensure that they're not walking into an organization where they just, it's superficial and it's like something that they talk about but don't actually do. What advice do you give to service designers and human-centered designers out there who are, on the hunt for jobs, and they want to ensure that they're walking into an organization where they can learn and continue to grow, and think in a less ableistic mindset?
I love that word ableistic. I'm about to steal it off you after
I've
this,
just
but I
made it
will.
up.
I'll
It's got
quote
a
you.
little TM at the bottom of it. Jamie Shields, I'm coming after you.
I think it's a bit like, when you're applying for a job and you go and do your homework in a company.
Hmm.
It's pretty much like you do when you're applying for a job. Like, the first thing I do for any company is I'll go look at their website. Is this company website actually accessible to me? And even if you don't know what accessible website looks like to you, if you're not disabled yourself,
Hmm.
there's plenty of tools out there that Wave.com does one where you can stick the company website in and it will come up and tell you what the issues are on that website.
Yeah.
If you have an inkling of accessibility and you know things around color contrast, you'll see if that website has color contrast issues. And in fact, if you really want to test the accessibility of the website, use a tab test. Use the tab key on your keyboard, tab through that company's website and see if it flows in order. If that's not flowing in order, as with the proper logical reading order, that website's not accessible. It hasn't been marked with tags or anything for somebody using this technology. You maybe can't use a mouse. And then obviously look at their about sections. Do they represent disability in any of these images? Because I think we think about representation of accessibility and disability to be about physical accessibility itself, being able to engage.
Mm.
We want to see disability represented too. And we don't mean just a white person using a wheelchair. We mean
Yeah.
like people of different diversities using stimming tools, using workplace adjustments, using and interacting with the workplace in ways that aren't just so binary we consider to be the typical.
Yeah.
And then also look at what they're talking about disability, the language you're using. Big telltale if somebody is understanding of ableism is the language you use with disability. If you see companies using words like differently abled or unique individuals or some other fluffy ableist euphemism, disabled and disability are not dirty words. Like the words that should be used, they should words that should be embraced and supported so individuals can use them. But also when you're speaking to them, ask them,
Yeah.
what is your ableism policy? Do you have an ableism policy? Do you have leaders who are disabled represented across the organisation? Do you have a disability network? Do you create accessible marketing? Look at their LinkedIn, look at the social medias, you'll see if the posts are accessible. There's loads of little telltales, and I think it's easy for disabled job seekers when they're looking because we know what we're looking for. We know if we can engage something or not. But I think if you're a designer, it's probably a little bit harder. So I think understanding that ableism perspective and what ableism actually entails,
Yeah.
and then looking at the website and seeing if you can identify any of that, because if you do, that'll be a big telltale. And if you're not sure, ask somebody who's disabled. Do you think this organisation is inclusive?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a really good point. When you're designing those services within, I'm thinking about government organizations there, it tends to come from the top down. So there might be a policy that has been created, and as a result, it's had a trigger effect across the organization where teams are kind of responding to that new policy update or whatever it is. What advice do you give to designers or even just business people in the organization at the moment to ensure that the policies that are getting created are kind of co-created with, members like yourself who've got a deep experience and expertise and lived experience that can help shape and reshape those policies? What advice do you give to those people who are in that situation where they're maybe working on that policy and it's out of date?
I was exactly what you just said, is start the conversation with the people with lived experience. We've seen organisations who have policies around accessibility where they've implemented a ramp at the entrance and said, this is amazing, it's all singing, all dancing. But when you ask a disabled person who's using a wheelchair, well, actually, that ramp's too steep and I
Yeah.
can't get up it. So the intent was there, but because they've not spoken to the community or those with lived experience, they go wrong. I'm very lucky in the sense that when we consult with businesses, my business partner Celia, she is a law and policy background, so she is just incredible when it comes to all the stuff and what is legally required and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think it's really just about being open, having those conversations.
Mm.
Don't jump in head first. I know it can seem that, oh, we're going to just run this and it's going to be fine. And you know what? It's only a wee bit of wording. It's not. It's more than wording. Because if you have an anti-ableist policy, that is the foundations of protecting disabled people in your workplace. It's the foundations to really then start building other policies like an accessibility
Yeah.
policy, a website policy around accessibility, and adjustments and
I love that.
accommodations policy. It's almost like a knock-on effect, but also don't just create them and leave them. Review them regularly. Make sure that wherever you're posting them, whether it's an employee handbook or your internal internet, that it's actually accessible too. It's all well and good having an ableism policy, but if it's an inaccessible ableist process blocking somebody from engaging, makes no sense.
I know, no, absolutely. When you're talking about ableism and you kind of hold the mirror back up to the organization, in your experience, what's the one thing that that those people refuse to accept, even if you have evidence to transform it? Well, what's your take on that?
Do you know what? Nobody likes being told what they've done wrong. Like, I hate it myself. Like, when my partner says, oh, you didn't put the toilet seat down, or you didn't hoover the floor, you missed a spot when your mop, but like, my guard goes up. And I get it. Nobody likes to hear that they've done something wrong.
Yeah.
But I think it's the way that we try to deliver things is we try to make it. The way we see to do business is probably a little bit different than everybody else. We're not very like black and white. We're very much like infused our personality into the business. We create a partnership where, do you know what, you can tell us you don't like stuff we're doing, we're not going to take offense. If you don't understand what we're saying, we'll communicate in a different way. It's almost like a friendship as well as a partnership. And I think when you're delivering that news, it's trying to deliver it in a way that isn't coming across as you're sassing them completely or saying, this is terrible. It's a bit like, I don't know if I'm allowed to say the word I want to say. And am I allowed to say a bad word?
What does it begin with?
S.
Yeah.
Okay, shit sandwich. Like I said, shit sandwich, where society have you give a little bit of bad, and then you give a little bit of good, then you give a little bit of bad, then you go back to it. So it's almost that, because you want to recognize where they are, because nobody's going to have this right. And any organization claiming to do it
Yeah,
is lying. And we tell organizations that we will say that nobody is getting this 100% right. There's parts that you're doing here brilliantly, which this organization isn't. And I think it's really good to have that mentality. It's not us against them. Everyone's on their own unique journey. So we work with them, show them the good, show them the bad,
for
where they
sure.
could improve. But we also try to help them roadmap that out, because it can be really intense to see all these things that you're doing wrong and trying to work out, where am I getting the time to do this? Where are we getting the resources? So we work with them to budget that out, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, 5 years, 10 years. We help ensure that there is measurable,
Yeah,
because again, organizations, there's no point telling them you're doing this wrong. Back it up, show them the data, show them what they can improve on, and help them create new data points, like especially around disability. We all think disability metrics is just how many disabled people do you have. No, it's how many people are engaged in your services using alternative ways, those accessible ways you've embedded. It's looking at, right, how many disabled people have we brought through this recruitment process? Now that we've removed these barriers, how many disabled people are going to offer? How
yeah,
many people are X, Y, Z, whatever the scenario is. But you get what I mean. So it's really about working with them to not give them all and say you're terrible, but really help understand, listen, this is where you're going well, this is where you're doing well here. Share that learning across those departments.
yeah. I love that. One of the things that I've used in my experience is playing back stuff that can go wrong. Like, I mean, what happens if you do nothing in this scenario where people continue to have the same experience and you've had this opportunity to fix it? That tends to create up this whole kind of dialogue of like, well, actually, you know what? Like, there's someone could trip and someone potentially could fall and really injure themselves. And then what would happen then? Like, and they're like, oh, there'd be a big insurance case. Would the newspapers maybe be involved as well? Like, and you might even get on you'd have to go on and do press. Yeah, okay, that's really true. Just trying to not scare them, but also like play the realities that this
Yeah.
stuff is not just superficial. This is meaningful. This is stuff that really matters. This is going to make or break not just people's days, but it could potentially their weeks or months in those scenarios. Jamie, you mentioned there about the services that you provide, and like this is a platform for you to talk about what services you offer to clients. What kind of clients do you tend to find are reaching out to Disabled by Society, and what kind of services are you providing to those clients?
Yeah, so oh, we have such a diverse pool of clients already. So I'm not going to name any of them, because I don't want to name one and then get in trouble for another because I didn't
That's
name
all
them.
right.
But like we've worked with governments, not
Yeah,
well UK governments, but not mainland. Well, actually, we do work with mainland governments sometimes too, which is interesting because I'm sure you and Celia probably have a chin wag about your experiences of working with governments. But we work with governments. We work pretty much with different organisations across different
yeah,
sectors. We work with construction. We work with marketing. We work with companies in recruitment. But what we try to do is it's so hard to try to get all the answers. So like if you're trying to make your recruitment process accessible, that's completely different to making your marketing accessible. If you're trying to make your website accessible, that's different to these other two departments
yeah.
as well. So what we try to do is we create solutions that either a one-off solution, so it could be a training session, it could be a consultant on a project, or it could be creating policies, or we create tailored solutions, so we create package solutions that either
Hmm.
can last anything from 1 month to a couple of years, depending on what it needs, but it would kind of be, right, you needed consultant, we're going to give you 20 hours consultant, you needed training, here's your training program
Okay.
outlined for the next 3 years. So we kind of take the pain out of having to run around and find all these different suppliers, because we work with other disabled suppliers ourselves.
Nice.
We offer speakers, and it's not just me and Celia sharing our life experiences. We will work with other people in the community, because we're, as much as we are very much corporate, so not even corporate, like just come and work with us,
Professionals.
everybody,
Yeah.
professionals, we're professionals. We also want to support the community, so we create a lot of free resources. We created a
Nice.
policy paper last year. We're actually just launched the newest one today, which is all around internalized ableism, but we then make that data available to other organizations and to individuals, because we don't have enough data there around ableism. So we're trying to create that. We create a lot of free resources we use in education. But in terms of our actual work, it's
Yeah.
everything from training, consultants, speaking, policy, you name it, we do it.
Yeah.
But we
That's
try to do
brilliant.
it in a way that is affordable and sustainable, and isn't going to be like, here's a mountain of work to do. It's actually, here, take my arm, we're going to guide you to the top of this.
Yeah, I love it. Jamie, for people who want to check out Disabled by Society, I'm going to put a link in the show notes. So if you're watching on YouTube, it's going to be in the description below. If you're on Spotify or Apple, it's in the description below. So check out Jamie's website, and we'll put a link to your LinkedIn as well, because I know you're like me, you're a LinkedIn fiend. You're always on there. That's how we've connected about this stuff. If there's one thing that you wish the listeners of the podcast to take away about this, what's their advice to them? What's the one thing for them to get started with, apart from checking your website, Jamie? I'm going to jump in there. What's the one thing you want them to take away and do?
One thing to take away is go learn about ableism. Like, you've heard a very snapshot view of what ableism is. It's such a hard thing to define because the dictionary doesn't even get it right. The dictionary definition of ableism is ableist, because it's written by non-disabled people. So what I'd say is go learn about ableism. Whether it's go ask ChatGPT, go ask Google, go type it into YouTube, watch this podcast back loads of times, and then go explore more. But it's learn about ableism and just continue to be open to learning.
Nice. Jamie, listen, look, I wrap every podcast up by thanking people for their vulnerability and their time and their energy. And you're no different. Like, I know you've come on here today, you've just recovered from COVID as well. And, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience and sharing your lived experience as well. So thank you so much for giving me that time. It's been absolutely fantastic for me as well.
Thank you so much for having me.